Imagine taking 60% of your monthly paycheck, putting it in a pile, and literally setting it on fire before you've even paid your rent, bought your groceries, or, I don't know, put fuel in your car.
Yeah, just burn it right out of the gate.
Right. And that is essentially the financial reality of almost every local council in England right now. I
Yeah.
mean, when you pay a £2,000 annual council tax bill, there's this natural assumption that, this money is fixing the potholes outside your house.
Or keeping the local leisure center open, making sure the bins are collected every Tuesday.
Exactly. But the mechanics of where that money actually goes, who spends it, and what they are legally forced to spend it on, it reveals a system that is just buckling under the weight of these invisible obligations.
It really is a profound disconnect between public expectation and the actual statutory reality. Because for the average person, local government feels like, the most direct, accessible form of democracy.
Well, yeah, you can literally walk down the street and see the services they provide.
Right. But under the hood, the English local government system is this highly complex, heavily restricted apparatus. And it's designed by central government to absorb basically the most expensive, demographic-driven crises in the whole country.
And understanding that apparatus is the ultimate shortcut for you, the listener. It's how you figure out how your daily life is actually governed, why your local library might be closing, and crucially, how to spot a local politician who genuinely doesn't have a clue what they're talking about.
Which happens a lot, unfortunately.
No, constantly. So today, our mission is to cut through that noise. We are looking specifically at English unitary authorities in this deep dive.
Right, getting into the weeds of what they do.
We want to know the mechanisms behind what they are legally forced to do, what they can do if they manage to find some spare change, and the areas where they possess absolutely zero power, despite what they might claim on your doorstep.
Yeah, the doorstep promises are always fascinating.
So, okay, let's unpack this. Because by the end of this deep dive, you're going to get a definitive ranked tech list. It's going to serve as an incredibly accurate lie detector test for literally any local councilor's election leaflet that comes through your letterbox.
I love that. But to even begin applying a checklist like that, we first have to establish the specific architecture of the council we are examining.
Because the English system is historically notorious for its overlapping layers, right?
It's a mess. In many traditional Pashashar areas, you still have what's known as a two-tier system. So this involves 21 county councils operating over the exact same geography as 164 smaller district councils.
And that is the setup that absolutely drives people crazy.
Oh, completely.
You call the county council to complain about your missed bin collection, and they tell you, oh, sorry, that's the district council's job.
And then you ask the district council to fix the massive pothole on your street, and they tell you the roads belong to the county council.
It's like working in an office with two entirely separate IT departments who refuse to use the same software, but they both expect you to pay for their servers.
That is a perfect analogy. And that fractured corporate structure is exactly why the national government is pushing hard for a definitive shift.
Moving away from the two-tier mess.
Exactly. The current English Devolution White Paper outlines a really clear intent to eliminate all remaining two-tier structures across England by 2028.
Wow, that's soon.
It is. The replacement model is the single-tier system, specifically the unitary authority. Currently, there are 62 of these, alongside 36 metropolitan districts and 32 London boroughs that operate on the exact same principle.
So a unitary authority just collapses all of those divided functions into one single corporate body.
Precisely. They're the one-stop shop.
So they handle the hyper-local street cleaning, and they handle the massive strategic infrastructure projects. Everything is under one roof. But I feel like we need to be careful here. Because just because a unitary authority handles all local matters, it doesn't mean they're like an independent city-state making up their own rules, does it?
No, not at all. And there's a really fascinating legal paradox at the heart of this called the general power of competence, which came out of the 2011 Localism Act.
Right, I saw this in the sources.
It's a brilliant piece of legislative theory, actually. Conceptually, it states that a local authority has the power to do anything that an individual person can generally do, provided it isn't explicitly prohibited by other national legislation.
So on paper, it sounds like absolute freedom. Like a council could legally open a commercial coffee shop or, I don't know, invest in a tech startup, or buy an office block.
Exactly. And many of them actually did try to become property developers to raise extra cash.
Wait, really?
Oh, yeah, lots of them bought up commercial real estate. But the reality is that they are statutory corporations. They have absolutely no inherent sovereignty.
Right, because they aren't the national government.
Exactly. Every single ounce of power they possess is loaned to them by the UK Parliament. So while they technically can open a coffee shop, their daily existence is entirely dictated by what Westminster legally forces them to do.
Okay, and that brings us to the core mechanism driving the current crisis, which the sources call the statutory squeeze.
Yes, the squeeze is very real.
Because local authorities operate under an estimated 1,200 statutory responsibilities.
It's a staggering number, and these are services they are legally obligated to provide, right? Regardless of how much money they have in the bank.
So when we look at the budget breakdown for the 2023 to 2024 financial year, that whole narrative of the Pothole and Bin Collection Council completely falls apart.
Totally crumbles. Because across local government, a massive 33% of service expenditure goes strictly to education.
Okay, let's break down the why of that 33%, because most listeners probably know that a huge number of schools are now academies.
Right, which are funded directly by central government.
Yeah, bypassing the local council entirely. So why is education still eating a third of a unitary authority's budget if they don't even run half the schools?
It's a great question. The cost is heavily driven by complex, demand-led statutory duties, primarily surrounding special educational needs and disabilities, or SEND.
Ah, great.
When a child is assessed as requiring an education, health, and care plan in EHCP, the council is legally bound to fund that specific care.
So that's not optional.
Not at all. That might involve paying for specialized private tutors, dedicated classroom assistants, or incredibly expensive daily taxi transport to a specialized independent school 50 miles away.
Oh, wow. That adds up fast.
Exactly. Demographic demand for these assessments has skyrocketed, and the unit costs charged by private providers have just surged. Yet the council cannot legally cap this spending.
You just have to pay the bill.
Right.
And then you add in adult social care, which consumes another 19% of the budget.
Yeah, that's the next huge chunk.
We are talking about an aging population with increasingly complex medical needs who are, thankfully, surviving longer. But the council is responsible for means-tested support.
Which means funding residential care home placements and daily at-home visitation care.
And because many local authorities no longer run their own care homes, they're basically at the mercy of private care monopolies dictating the weekly placement fees.
That's exactly it. Following that, you have policing, which takes up around 13% of the local budget, often funneled through joint boards or police and crime commissioners.
Okay, so that's education, adult social care, police.
And then another 11% goes to children's social care. That's managing foster placements, safeguarding vulnerable children, employing social workers.
Wow. So if you add up education, adult social care, policing, and children's social care, you have burned through over 70% of the entire budget before a single street sweeper is deployed.
Exactly. Before a single planning application is reviewed, and before a single book is placed on a library shelf.
And the mechanism of this statutory squeeze is that these social care costs are entirely demand-led. Like, a unitary authority cannot legally turn around and say, sorry, we've hit our quota for vulnerable elderly people this month. We can't house you.
They absolutely cannot say that. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you start to see the impossible math they're dealing with.
Because central government restricts how they make money, right?
Yes, tightly restricts it.
Yeah.
Central government dictates how councils raise their primary source of income, council tax. A council usually cannot raise it above a centrally mandated cap, which is often around 3 to 5%, without triggering a highly expensive local referendum.
Which no one is going to vote for.
Of course not. At the same time, central government grants have been significantly reduced over the past 14 years.
So their income is artificially capped by Westminster, while their costs are driven by localized demographics and inflation over which they have absolutely zero control.
That's the impossible math.
So what happens when that math finally breaks? Because the news is full of headlines saying councils are going bankrupt.
Right. Do you hear that a lot?
The sources point to an avalanche of councils hitting the wall. You know, Northamptonshire, Slough, Croydon, Thurrock, Woking, Birmingham, Nottingham. But local councils don't actually go bankrupt in the way a private company does, do they? Like, they can't just liquidate their assets and close their doors.
No, they cannot be liquidated. What actually happens is the issuance of a Section 114 notice.
Okay, what is that exactly?
It's widely misunderstood. It is not bankruptcy. It is an emergency legal handbrake that fundamentally strips the democratically elected politicians of their power.
Wait, it strips the politicians of power?
Yes. Under the Local Government Finance Act, if the chief financial officer calculates that the council's expenditure is going to exceed its resources, they are legally obligated to issue this notice.
So it's the moment the accountants legally override the politicians?
Precisely the mechanism. The moment a Section 114 notice is issued, a strict 21-day prohibition period begins. A spend control board is established, and it completely removes spending authority from the elected councilors.
Oh, wow.
Every single new expenditure is frozen unless it is required to fulfill a baseline statutory duty like protecting a vulnerable adult or maintaining public safety.
So you suddenly need senior financial sign-off just to, buy office supplies or fix a broken window at a community center.
Literally down to the paper clips.
That's insane. And to avoid hitting that S114 brick wall, councils start hollowing out their discretionary services, right?
Yes, the nice to have.
These are the things they want to do but aren't legally forced to do. So funding for the arts, local theater subsidies, discretionary welfare grants, and leisure centers just get slashed.
And even services that are technically statutory get squeezed through legal loopholes.
Really? Like what?
Well, libraries are a perfect example. The Public Libraries and Museums Act, 1964, says councils must provide a, quote, comprehensive and efficient library service.
Which is an incredibly vague legal standard.
Extremely vague. It doesn't stipulate a minimum number of physical buildings, opening hours, or employed librarians.
Ah, I see where this is going.
Yeah, consequently, councils have weaponized that vagueness to save money. They argue that a volunteer-run reading room, or a mobile book bus, technically fulfills the duty of being efficient.
Wow.
And that interpretation allowed local authorities to close 33% of all physical library sites between 2009 and 2020.
That is massive. And when even stripping the discretionary services isn't enough, we see central government stepping in with what the sources call capitalization directions.
Yes, another very dry-sounding term.
It sounds like deeply boring financial jargon, but the actual mechanism is wild. So normally, a council is strictly forbidden from using capital funds, meaning money generated from selling physical assets like land or buildings, to pay for day-to-day revenue costs, like staff salaries or electricity bills.
Right, you can't sell the house to buy groceries.
Exactly. But a capitalization direction is basically a special permission slip from Westminster allowing them to break that rule.
It is.
They are literally allowed to sell off a community-owned car park or a historic town hall just to pay for next month's foster care placements. It's just a structural deficit masked by asset stripping.
And it highlights the absolute limit of their financial autonomy,
Yeah.
which actually brings us to the vital counterpart of understanding what a unitary authority is forced to do.
Right, recognizing the areas where their hands are completely removed from the steering wheel.
Because the UK is one of the most centralized states in the developed world, massive levers of public policy are kept firmly in Whitehall.
And here's where it gets really interesting. I had a leaflet pushed through my letterbox just yesterday for a local council by-election.
Oh, let's hear it.
The candidate was promising to slash NHS hospital wait times, put more bobbies on the beat to stop crime, and stand up against rising inflation.
Of course they were.
It sounds fantastic, but reading through these sources, I realized this person was essentially promising to change the weather.
It is a profound level of political theater. Let's just break down those out-of-bounds zones mechanically, starting with the macroeconomy.
Okay.
Local councils have absolutely no levers to pull regarding national interest rates, inflation targets, or income tax bans. And as we established, they cannot even borrow money to fund their day-to-day services. They can only borrow for physical capital projects, like building a bridge.
So promising to fight inflation on a local council level is mathematically impossible.
Entirely impossible.
Okay, what about the NHS? Because local authorities do have a statutory duty for public health, doesn't that mean they have a say in the local hospital?
No, and this is a common misunderstanding. The term public health in local government refers to preventative initiatives.
Like what?
Things like smoking cessation programs, sexual health clinics, and obesity campaigns. It does not mean clinical health care. The National Health Service is a completely separate, centrally funded, and centrally managed statutory beast. A unitary authority does not run the hospitals. They do not manage the GP surgeries. They don't dictate clinical standards. They have absolutely zero operational power to reduce a waiting list for a hip replacement.
And the promise about putting bobbies on the beat.
Also completely outside their jurisdiction.
Seriously?
Seriously. While a council might fund unarmed local community wardens to deal with, littering or antisocial parking, the operational deployment of actual police officers is the exclusive domain of the regional chief constable.
Ah, and they are overseen by an elected police and crime commissioner, right?
Or regional mayor, exactly. The council does not set policing priorities, they don't control the courts, they don't manage the prison service, and they have no influence over national sentencing guidelines.
It's just wild. I also see immigration and national borders brought up constantly at local town halls.
Again, entirely out of bounds. The Home Office dictates immigration policy, asylum processing, and border security.
But don't councils have to house refugees?
Yes, a local council might be statutorily required to find temporary housing for refugees placed in their area by the Home Office. But the council itself has no jurisdictional power to alter the actual immigration system.
Right, that's a national issue.
Exactly. Similarly, Social Security, things like universal credit payments, the state pension age, or disability allowance criteria, that is all entirely managed by the Department for Work and Pensions.
The psychology behind this confusion is just fascinating to me. Voters naturally care about their pensions, their doctors, their safety.
Of course they do.
But because the local council is the most physically visible arm of the state, I mean, they literally drive a truck down your street every week to empty your bins. Voters project all of their national anxieties onto the local councillor standing on their doorstep.
And too often, candidates actively exploit that confusion rather than correcting it. They promise interventions they know they cannot legally deliver.
Which brings us to the ultimate payoff of this deep dive.
Yes, the checklist.
Now that we understand the mechanisms of a unitary authority, that crushing statutory squeeze of social care, the tight financial restrictions, and the absolute lack of power over national institutions, we can construct our lie detector test.
Let's do it.
We need a simple, ranked checklist of what should be on a local candidate's election leaflet. If they want to run the unitary authority, what must they actually address?
Okay, let's build it. Ranking the priorities by how closely they reflect the actual statutory and financial reality of the job.
Rank 1 has to be the budget eaters, social care and education.
Without question. A credible leaflet must articulate a strategy for adult social care, children's services, and SEND provision.
Because that's where the money goes.
As we established, these areas consume well over 60% of a unitary authority spending. If a local candidate is asking for your vote but provides no plan for managing the aging population's care needs or supporting children with specialized requirements, they are ignoring the vast majority of the institution's purpose.
It's the equivalent of applying to manage a massive restaurant and having absolutely no thoughts on how to run the kitchen.
That is exactly what it is.
Okay, rank 2, housing and strategic planning. This seems to be the area where a councillor actually has genuine, tangible local muscle.
It is. It's the primary theater for local political combat. While central government sets broad national housing targets, the unitary authority creates the local plan and adjudicates specific planning applications.
So they decide where the houses actually go.
Right. A candidate needs to explain how they will balance the mandated need for new housing against the protection of local greenbelts.
And paying for the impact of those houses.
More importantly, yes. How will they utilize mechanisms like Section 106 agreements to force property developers to fund local infrastructure, ensuring new housing estates have the roads, schools, and GP surgeries to actually support them?
Excellent. Rank 3, environmental and regulatory services, the highly visible, universally utilized statutory duties.
This is the baseline competence test. Waste management, recycling targets, street cleaning, and highway maintenance.
The stuff everyone notices.
Yeah. It lacks the geopolitical glamour of national policy, but ensuring potholes are filled and bins are collected efficiently is the fundamental social contract of local government. A candidate must demonstrate how they intend to maintain these universal services while the budget is being squeezed by social care.
Makes total sense. And finally, rank 4, fiscal realism.
A candidate must demonstrate that they understand the existential threat of a Section 114 notice.
The accountant's handbrake?
Exactly. Under the Local Government Act 1999, councils are bound by a best value duty, which legally requires them to secure continuous improvement and value for money in all expenditures.
So they can't just promise the moon?
No. Do they have a realistic, mathematically sound plan for the council's finances, or are they relying on magical thinking? Do they acknowledge the dangers of relying on capitalization directions and asset stripping just to balance the books?
So, to recap the lie detector test for you, the listener. Rank 1, social care and send. Rank 2, housing and infrastructure planning. Rank 3, bins, roads, and regulatory services. And rank 4, a realistic grip on Section 114 and fiscal realism.
This raises an important question, though. Based on the leaflets you've seen, how many candidates actually passed this test?
Frankly, incredibly few. And that is the observation you really need to take away from this. If you receive a leaflet for a unitary authority election and the bold font promises to save our local NHS hospital, lower national income taxes, or crack down on border control, you are looking at performative politics.
Pure theater.
That candidate is exposing a fundamental, perhaps willful ignorance of the role they are asking you to give them. A failure to cover our checklist represents a complete lack of understanding of what the position can and cannot actually achieve.
They are essentially applying to be the branch manager of a highly regulated franchise while promising to unilaterally rewrite the global supply chain. It is legally and functionally impossible.
So what does this all mean? We started by talking about your council tax burning up before it even hits the street. And by dissecting the mechanics of the English unitary authority, which is the definitive future of the entire local government system, we found out who is actually holding the matches.
We really have seen the machinery at work. These single-tier megastructures are bogged down by immense demand-led statutory duties in social care and special education.
Trapped by the demographics.
They're trapped between rising demographic costs and rigid central government funding caps. And that's forcing them to dismantle local discretionary services simply to avoid the legal emergency of a Section 114 notice.
And doing all of that while having no say over the big national issues.
Right. They operate entirely within the strict parameters set by Parliament, wholly separate from the NHS, the justice system, and the national economy.
It means you now have the ultimate cheat sheet. When election season rolls around, you have the exact knowledge required to cut through the national rhetoric, hold your local politicians accountable, and demand they focus on the very real, very difficult job they are actually applying for.
Absolutely. But as we conclude, I think there's one final provocative reality we need to confront regarding the government's grand plan for this system.
Okay, let's hear it.
We discussed the devolution white paper's push to turn all of England into these massive unitary authorities by 2028. Well, to achieve the required financial efficiencies, the government specifies that most of these new single-tier councils will need a population size of 500,000 people or more.
500,000 residents under one local council umbrella.
The central logic is purely based on financial scale.
Yeah.
But we have to question the democratic mechanism here. Does consolidating power into a council that large actually sever it from the very local communities it is meant to represent?
Oh, that's a huge issue.
If you intentionally eliminate the hyperlocal district councils to save money on administrative duplication, do you inherently lose the hyperlocal voice? If a local authority covering 500,000 people becomes too structurally massive to fail, but too geographically vast to listen to a single street's complaints, well, what exactly happens to the concept of local democracy?
It's an incredible question to leave on, because if the entire point of understanding this local government structure was to find the people making the decisions that affect your daily life, it really doesn't help if the new, hyper-efficient corporate structure is so vast that your voice is completely lost in the machinery.